comply with anti-money laundering requirements as it pertains to this type of technology, etc. But notwithstanding all of those calls, the SEC not only continued their enforcement campaigns based on the long-standing securities laws that began in a traditional securities context, but rather they expanded their enforcement campaigns last year. So they continued its litigation against major centralized exchanges like Coinbase, Kraken, and Binance. They continued litigation against issuers like Ripple, and they initiated new suits against other alleged intermediaries acting as purported brokers or dealers, such as by providing wallet services or providing market liquidity. And recognizing that they, as a regulator, can't do it alone, but have to work with others within the country and also beyond it. She also set out a list of 10 non-exhaustive products and issues that they will tackle. But this isn't set out in any order of priority, but they're going to tackle the status of crypto assets as a security or not a security, paths to registration, whether crypto lending and staking is covered, and also a cross-border sandbox, recognizing that many crypto projects are international and cross-border. So stay tuned for details on the new policy, laws, and regulations. Now, that's all well and good moving forward, but what about the existing SEC investigations and cases we mentioned? Can they really just go from years of ramping up and filing enforcement actions to making a sudden U-turn? So on that point, Commissioner Peirce has also said that the Commission's handling of crypto has been marked by legal imprecision and commercial impracticality. Many cases remain in litigation. Many rules remain in the proposal stage, and many market participants remain in limbo. Determining how best to disentangle all these strands, including ongoing litigation, will take time. Please be patient. It requires work across the whole agency and a lot of cooperation with other regulators, but they need to do this in an orderly and practical way. So what does it mean to be practical? There's a few different paths forward, given the clearly stated new policy direction, focusing on new regulations rather than enforcement based on an older, arguably unclear set of securities laws. So when the SEC Enforcement Division investigates a potential violation of securities laws, they gather information and have discussions with the targets of the investigation, or probably their lawyers. So the SEC may reach a point where they issue what's called a Wells notice, laying out the theory of their enforcement case and giving that target an opportunity to argue why the SEC shouldn't initiate an actual enforcement suit against them. At this stage, the way forward is basically in the SEC's control. They get to largely decide the timing and the course forward. They hold the ball and gets to set what happens next. But if and when the time comes that the SEC decides to file a suit based on these alleged securities violations, the game shifts, the rules shift. They file in a US federal court, and then the process becomes like any other civil suit in the US federal court, which is subject to federal civil procedural rules and overseen by a federal judge. So the way forward on all these individual matters depends on where in that life cycle of an investigation and suit it was when the policy shifted. So for some cases that are still in the investigation phase, the SEC can decide to just drop the case entirely if it wants, or it could continue to invest resources into it. For example, the SEC may decide that investigations that are based on simple registration violations, meaning failure to register something under the securities laws, maybe those should be dropped. That kind of seems in line with their current policy that new regulations are needed about registration. But if the investigation includes an allegation of fraud or misconduct, then maybe they'll continue with the case, because that touches on the consumer protection part of their regulatory remit. It's a little more complex for cases that have already been filed in court, including registration violation matters in court. The SEC can't really just decide themselves to drop it without procedural formalities, right? So it could opt to seek to voluntarily dismiss some of these cases, and there's court procedures to do that. But another possible outcome is that they'll reach some kind of settlement with the defendants, perhaps on terms less onerous than if this were under the previous administration. And these might be terms that the defendants are willing to agree to. So, for example, and this is just through public commentary by others, you might see settlements requiring new and stronger internal compliance programs, meaning we'll end this case, but you, the defendant, have to improve your compliance programs. Or for non-fraud or non-intentional misconduct cases, the thinking is that the SEC is unlikely to want to spend a lot of time and more resources litigating all the way to trial, which takes years, on a legal theory that the current administration doesn't even believe in. So all told, these cases are in a state of flux. There's even key senior enforcement lawyers that were shuffled around within the agency. Reportedly, this even includes a lawyer who previously ran the agency's special crypto enforcement unit, as well as 50 other lawyers and staff members within that unit. And I can actually speak with experience based on some cases that I'm handling now, that all these developments feed into the ever-evolving legal strategy and expectations of case outcomes. The SEC has publicly filed requests for more time to file written submissions that are due in multiple ongoing cases, citing the task force and how the task force work may impact and facilitate the potential resolution of cases. So by getting an extension or a stay of a case, all sides in the court can save judicial resources until the SEC policymakers decide how to address these cases. And just as a final point about the US, a lot of the above is focused on the US executive branch, meaning President Trump's policies, and also executive agencies that fall under the president. But the legislature is also signaling more pro-crypto policies, given the executive support. They've said that they want to provide innovators with new tools and basically introduce new bills that support that. Last week, there was a bill called for stablecoins called the Guiding and Establishing National Innovation in U.S. Stablecoins Act. The acronym is GENIUS Act, GENIUS. So sometimes I wonder how much time these legislative aides actually spend to come up with these acronyms.